Hi everyone, this is a continuation video of my previous video about my cancer related or pre-cancer related symptoms. So, in US, the thyroid nodule that had been detected by the doctor, they had recommended that I do a ultrasound of it regularly once every 2-3 years. And though the doctor had given me a prescription for doing the ultrasound, when I was busy with keeping my energy up, keeping my emotions high via doing exercise and other regimen, I was not focusing on my physical health problems. And symptomatically, these nodules hadn't really given any physical distress to me. As a result, I completely forgot about having a thyroid problem. So, initially, though, what started happening in my body as different chemicals in India were impacting my health. Now, the already my body had one kind of pre-cancerous nodules in my that had a potential to develop into cancer over a period of time, because that is how cancers develop. That something which is a nodule means that there is a tumor like growth there, and it's a small tumor like growth because it's a nodule. Now that same small tumor like growth, if it expands into larger sizes, then it will be considered as cancerous. So that's why they wanted a regular checkup on it to ensure that it doesn't get converted into cancer. Now, what was happening to my body though while I stayed in India was not simply just because of pesticides, but pesticide exposure is the main thing that has come up according to my study of my health history. And it didn't emerge for me that this is happening with pesticides initially, because initially the direct correlation to pesticide exposure was very less. Only later on I realized that some of these symptoms had some indirect long-term pesticide exposure related correlation too. So initially what was happening to me was, after I had lived in India for about a year and I had got adjusted to some of the climatic conditions in India, still my body was showing some symptoms very different from what other people in the family who have lived in India longer than me were experiencing. And that's why many a times families ignore, because I told you in the previous video, even if the same family members are getting exposed to the same pesticide at the same time while living in the same house or traveling with each other in the same environment, everyone will not get the same symptoms. So for me, what happened was, initially what was happening, anytime I would shower, slowly over time I realized that the water in Navi Mumbai was so bad that my scalp would get flaky eczema like flakes, or I would have scalp irritation with the water here. And initially I didn't even realize it was a water problem. I thought maybe it is a shampoo related problem, so I switched shampoo brands. Then also the problem was not getting resolved. Then finally I had also for a few years stopped using shampoos regularly. Like in US I used to use shampoos every other day or 3-4 days later. In India also I was doing the same thing. I was using shampoos every other day or 2-3 days later. And because Indian climate was dirtier, I had to usually do every other day in India. But when my skin irritation was too much, scalp irritation was too much, I reduced the shampoo usage. And that's when, and not just reduce, there was also a brief period of time when I had such high skin irritation from soaps and shampoos that I had almost reduced usage by 90%. So when my usage was so less, that's when I realized it's the water that was causing these scalp irritation problems. Then so usually this itchy scalp irritation problem, people don't correlate to pesticide poisoning or chemical poisoning from water pollution. But usually if you are having scalp problems, skin problems, many a times the source of our scalp and skin problems are from chemical exposures in our bathing water, washing water, the water that we use to wash our clothes. If that water is contaminated, then that chemical in the water will be there a little bit in our clothes, and from our clothes then end up causing the skin irritation problems. And those minor skin irritation problems that I used to have, scalp irritation problems, that were very at a minor level, ignorable level, I was not distressed about it, I was not concerned enough to see a doctor. That same minor level problem, over 4-5 years of exposure to these similar contaminated waters, ended up escalating to a larger problem when enough of the pesticides and other chemicals had started accumulating in my body and started impacting my body's different organs, health functions. So, first minor symptoms were scalp irritation, skin irritation, then which had escalated to moderate symptoms, and then from moderate symptoms to major symptoms over a period of time. Likewise, another problem that I faced was when the municipality was regularly spraying pesticides during summer time, to just before the rainy season would start. They would start spraying to ensure that we don't get mosquitoes during rainy season, or they would be spraying regularly during rainy season. Now, during this time, I realized that any time we had kept any fruits in our tables and the spraying had happened, some of the spray was entering our homes via the windows. And if I ate those bananas or apples that were left on the table, even though I'm washing it and eating it, if some of it had penetrated these bananas, I started getting stomach upset issues. And I directly correlated it to pesticide, because every time the pesticide spray was happening, and if that same day or 1-2 days later I consume these food which might have got exposed while the spray was done on the home, around the home, they were only doing it in the ground floor of the buildings. But even then, the exposure was happening at the our houses in the first floor, and even then some exposure was happening via the windows. And there was also, of course, some exposure if I'm walking on the streets, like I mentioned in the previous video. You can get exposure while you're walking, and if they have sprayed around the whole neighborhood, the pesticide is also sprayed on our trees, it is also landed on our soil, it has also landed indirectly in our underground water supply. And if there are any micro fractures or pipeline problems in our buildings housing, so even if a pure clean water has been sent by the municipality to our homes, that pure clean water, while the pesticides have been sprayed on the streets where some pipelines are cracked, or where underground water supply has got highly contaminated with pesticides over long term spraying, then those micro fractures or broken pipelines can end up eventually contaminating our home water supply. Same way, if the municipality is spraying around a dam from which my water supply is coming, again the same problem. If you are spraying around the dam, because of air being prevalent everywhere, when you are spraying even near the dam, not even in the dam, you will still have some chemicals penetrate the dam water, and then they would come to our home water supply. And if someone was in peak health, maybe they will not manifest some of these symptoms. But if their body is not in peak health, already some diseases are going on in their body, or already enough pesticides have accumulated in the body such that their body has already started malfunctioning in some ways, then you will start slowly getting moderate to severe symptoms of exposure. So what was the moderate and severe symptom of exposure that started happening to me after either municipality was spraying or my building society was spraying? And I used to live in two different places in Navi Mumbai, one in Nerul and one in Kharghar. So in Kharghar also, my neighboring building had very beautiful garden, but their gardeners also used a lot of chemicals. So I had chemical exposure from their gardening activities, because their gardens faced directly the balcony of one of the rooms where I used to stay and do my artwork and do my other projects. So anytime they are spraying any chemical in the garden, the sprayed chemical, invariably some of it was coming into my homes and I was inhaling and getting exposure from there. Then if my municipality has done spraying or my building has done spraying on the stairs and steps of a building or in the gardens of a building, again, if you are walking down the stairs or if you are walking down the garden, on the garden, you are, even if the pesticide spraying happened 5 days back, 10 days back, some layer of it will be accumulated on the stairwell walls, some layer of it would be accumulated on the trees and plants, and that invariably you will also end up inhaling, even though the spraying might have happened a few days back, because these pesticides don't simply disappear, they still remain accumulated somewhere on some surfaces, and as a result causing health issues. So what was happening to me was I was getting intense sweating when I'm walking to, say, I used to love walking a lot. So after 1-2 hours, I used to go for 1-2 hour walk, sometimes in Kharghar. So when I'm going for a 1 hour, 1.5 hour walk, when I'm going for that longer walk, initially for 1-2 years, I had not much health problems. But over time of exposure to the chemicals in those areas, chemicals in Nerul, what happened was, and most of the time there were continuous pesticide exposures happening. As a result, when walking, I had again the similar breathing distress, respiratory distress, cardiac distress related functional problems while walking up the stairs, while walking on a road which has been sprayed with pesticides. If I'm going to a train station and there's a lot of pesticide accumulation on the train station walls over time of spraying, then again I'm getting inhalation problem, pesticide exposure related problem. And it didn't matter if the train station had the spraying done 1 year back also, the sprays are still staying accumulated in the walls somewhere. Even if the train station municipality is not doing anything to spray in the train station but was just spraying around the train's neighborhood, still some of the air particulate matters will eventually settle on the walls of that area. So anywhere I was going, I was getting the pesticide related problems, which initially was either respiratory distress, cardiac distress, intense sweating, if I'm just passing by an area and my body has already had enough exposure of the pesticide. Then from the water, what started happening, during summer time, I was noticing in the initial years of coming back from US, every time I would take a shower in the summer, I would get intense sweating after taking a shower. Now, initially I just thought, okay, maybe it's the humidity in India that is causing it. But when my body had toxed out and had also started experiencing the respiratory and cardiac symptoms, that is when I realized that the water pollution was leading to my intense sweating, because the toxins in the water, it could be pesticides, it could be pesticides plus other chemicals, but whatever chemicals were there in the water, they were harmful to my body. That's why every time I'm taking a shower using tap water, and in the summertime I was getting intense sweating, and also breathing distress started happening to me after taking a shower after few years of exposure in water like this. And this intense sweating that I was feeling, this cardiac distress and breathing respiratory distress that I was feeling was so bad. I used to feel like as soon as I took a shower, if I don't leave, and because that, say it is a pesticide contaminated water that is giving me this distress. Now when you are taking a shower in the bathroom, our Indian bathrooms are usually smaller in size, so what is happening is in the bathroom walls, this pesticide is now, when you're showering, the shower is spraying it everywhere, right? So it's also spraying it on the bathroom walls. So over time, if regularly the water is once a month, say they are spraying in the municipality, and once a month our water supply is contaminated, then once a month the pesticide is accumulating in my bathroom walls. And as a result, with the pesticide accumulating in the bathroom walls regularly, because every time we are showering it, it's also accumulating. So every time a little bit of it is accumulating over time of how much ever pesticides were there in that water. eventually it is enough toxins are settled in the walls of the bathroom also. So immediately after taking a shower, I used to feel suffocated in the bathroom. I used to feel like I'm right now going to have a heart attack in the bathroom. These things started happening. Or every time the municipality is spraying, even if I'm living in the first floor, I'm not on the ground walking while they are spraying it, I was getting the breathing distress from even smaller amounts of pesticides being inhaled. So that was happening. Then what else started happening? With the cardiac distress, my heart rate went really high. Like if my normal heart rate should be around 100, I was sometimes noting that if I'm just simply walking up the stairs, my physical activity started falling apart, because my body's, what was happening was my cardiovascular system was completely getting shot by exposure to pesticides. As a result, again, when I was walking up the stairs, I was having breathing distress, and same thing started happening that had happened to me in US, where I had the lung function test had failed for me, and the symptoms were very similar. There the lung function test failed and the heart didn't show, according to the doctor, any malfunctions, but I had the same respiratory and cardiac distress. And there what was happening, see, what I used to do when I was living alone in US, or even when I'm living alone in India, if you go grocery shopping, I love walking. That's why I will, or in India I would usually walk to the shops, buy groceries. It might be 1 kg grocery, 10 kg, 5 10, not 10 kg. Usually I will buy 5 kg, up to 5 kg I could carry easily, and I had no problems usually carrying up to 5 kg of weight. But in US also this happened. In gyms also, when I would practice, do weight training, I could do 5 to 15 kgs of weight training. And in US I used to buy more groceries because I had a car, so sometimes my grocery load could be more than 5 kgs. So when I would climb up the stairs taking those groceries, I was getting cardiac respiratory distress, and that's why I had gone to the doctor. Same thing happened in India. If I walked up the stairs, and this time it was worse, because even though I was shopping less in India, I was buying lesser groceries in India, and even that lesser quantity of groceries of 1 to 5 kgs, if I was carrying up the stairs, my body was not able to carry that less amount. This started happening. Or if I'm carrying it, I started getting breathless, I started having increased heart rate, I started sweating, I started feeling as if I'm going to have a heart attack, and all these things started happening to me. And earlier, when I used to be able to walk easily for one hour, my body couldn't take that cardiac overload, and I wasn't able to walk even for 15-20 minutes. 15-20 minutes walk started becoming a difficult activity for me. So that's why. And then what else was happening? I started getting increased sweating, increased hair fall, increased sunlight sensitivity, like the same afternoon sun, which didn't used to bother me earlier, because sometimes I used to go to walks at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it didn't used to bother me. Sometimes I used to go for walks at 9 o'clock in the morning. I was not working at that time, so I had this free time to explore different walking time zones. So if I'm walking at 10 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, sometimes I have even gone, because I was sometimes feeding stray dogs, I had gone in the afternoon also at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I had no health issues walking in the afternoon sun at that time. But when some toxic symptoms started developing in the body, at that time, be it 8 o'clock sun, 10 o'clock sun, or 12 o'clock sun, 4 o'clock sun, my skin was getting very irritated. It is called sunlight sensitivity. Your skin can't tolerate the excess heat from, like, for the skin it is excess heat from the sun. And I was getting allergies to multiple things, from food to clothing detergents to shampoos to soaps to face washes. Whatever I used to use normally, none of those products were working. If I bought some new products also, very less of those new products were helping me, and my skin would start getting very irritated. And I am such a careful person that if my skin is starting to get irritated, I will not use that product. Even if I bought it, I will not use it. So I had gone to one doctor with some of the thyroid symptoms, because at that time COVID was also happening. It had been about 6, 7 or 8 months after COVID, and my symptoms had gone on 1, 2 years before COVID. Also, some of these symptoms happened 1, 2 years after COVID. So while these symptoms were going on of skin irritation, hair fall, and many thyroid storm related symptoms happened. At that time I remembered that I had a thyroid nodule problem I should look into, because if the thyroid nodule had got worsened states, then these thyroid storms, cytokine storms symptoms can happen to someone. So I went to a thyroid doctor first to ask her for help. And though I knew that it was a thyroid problem partly that could be causing these sunlight sensitivity, because sunlight sensitivity, hair fall, I had also some skin darkening phase going on at that time, which is called tanning and leathery skin. That kind of skin started happening a little bit at that time, but it had happened 3-4 months before I went to her, because 3-4 months before I saw her, it was the lockdown phase where people were not seeing any doctors. People were only going to see the doctors if they had COVID. And because of the lockdown, because initially I didn't consider these symptoms too severe, and I was just trying to manage the symptoms, and because in lockdown people were going for flu shots and other stuff, I was not trying to go to the doctor, and I had got really very sick to even get out of the bed to go to the doctor. And before seeing the thyroid doctor, one time I had gone to the ER because I was feeling the respiratory distress and my cardiac heart rate was high. But the emergency room here, they were so focused in looking at COVID patients that this increased heart rate for them was not that much of a concern. So and my breathing distress, what was happening, say in my home, I don't have the same filtered environment as a hospitals. So I don't have a HEPA filter in my home. So the home's air filtration device will filter out some chemicals possibly if I turn on a AC. But if I'm not turning on any ACs, my home doesn't have a filtration system to take out impurities from the air. So if my respiratory distress is happening from chemical, physical, other impurities in the air, I will not have breathing distress if I go to an environment where these impurities from the air are not there. So that's what happened. Like when I went to the doctor, my respiratory distress actually, while just waiting only for the doctor, in the half an hour I waited in the hospital waiting room, at the time only this filtration system of the hospital is filtering out all the impurities that are causing my respiratory distress. As a result, my respiratory distress wasn't showing up for them when they were checking me initially for something. And even if my cardiac distress was showing up as an increased heart rate, they were just minimizing it and ignoring it, not understanding that I was suffering continuously for months and months with these symptoms, and after months of suffering I am going to them for help about it. But many of these doctors were not understanding that patients won't come to you, at least patients like me. I'm not a hypochondriac. I ignored my thyroid thing, the ultrasound checkup that I should do. I ignored it for 4-5 years, and then if I was a hypochondriac, I would have gone immediately right after I came to India. But I hadn't gone because I'm not a hypochondriac. I was not concerned and I didn't have symptoms. So when you don't have symptoms, when you're not a hypochondriac, you will not go for minor issues. And I was also not bothered about COVID at that time, because to me it was a respiratory illness that can be managed by doing breathing exercises, eating clean food, breathing clean air. You could manage it a little bit. So I was trying to focus on doing those things in breathing related problem issues. But but because the thyroid symptoms were really high, and initially I thought it was related to thyroid problems that I'm getting the feverishness and sunlight sensitivity and everything, went to a thyroid doctor. She initially didn't even hear most of these symptoms that I'm narrating in these videos. She was like, what are your current symptoms? Now in the current symptoms, majority of my thyroid symptoms had already happened by the time I went to her. my current symptom at that time was only hair fall, because my sunlight sensitivity phase had also started slowly passing. So minor sunlight sensitivity was there, majorly hair fall was there, and skin irritation was my problem. Now those are not mostly thyroid problem related symptoms, but she was so adamant at hearing what is the current symptom. Even though I tried to tell her, ma'am, I have some symptoms I have to tell you that were from the past, she was not willing to listen. And in her adamancy and in just listening to the current symptoms, I could only express to her my heart related problems and my skin related problems. I forgot about the hair fall. So as a result, she was almost going to just ignore my symptoms, ignore my distress, not listen to what was happening with me, just give a prescription for allergy. And I hadn't gone to her for my allergy symptom resolution, because my resolution for my allergy was to avoid all the chemicals and products that were giving me skin irritation. But then I was like, because I knew it was a thyroid problem, I finally showed her my old US report. That's when she's like, oh, you have this report, let me check your thyroid area. Then she does the thyroid area check, even though when I had gone to her, this area was swollen. And if she was a good doctor, she could have observed that I had a swollen gland. And why will a patient come to a thyroid specialist if the patient doesn't have a thyroid problem or doesn't think that they have a... I was not recommended by some general physician to go to her. I came to her by myself. So I'm not an idiot, that most people are not idiots to go to a thyroid specialist if they don't have any thyroid symptom related health issues, right? But sometimes patients think or doctors think every patient who's coming to them is uneducated, which kind of pissed me off. So I never went to her for follow-up. But what she did provide to me was some tests to do the ultrasound again, some tests to do some thyroid enzyme tests, and also to do a calcium checkup. Now in the thyroid enzyme test, like before, nothing showed up. In the ultrasound, these nodules had grown up in size and number, so they again did a FNAC. And this FNAC report, now I went to a different hospital to do it, because I didn't want to go to that doctor. And I thought Indian hospitals will have at least the courtesy that once a FNAC has been done, to call the patient that your report is ready. But I don't know what is wrong with the Indian hospital systems, but if a right doctor is not mentioned in the system, their FNAC reports only apparently go to a doctor. It doesn't go to a patient or something. I don't know what was going on there. But almost 2 weeks passed before I was like, okay, it's been long time that I have waited for this FNAC. Let me go and connect with the hospital. And then the hospital is saying, oh, your report has maybe come, let me print it out for you. And they took a while to print the report. They had to first check with the doctor to print the report and give it to the patient, which is the major hassle for any patient care issue, if you don't give the patient their reports as soon as it has arrived. And if you have a confusion in the report, you should talk to the patient or the doctor who did the FNAC. It was because the FNAC was done in the same hospital as the pathology who was checking the FNAC for any cancer. So if it was the same organization, the organization needs to speak to each other. But that doctor had only written in my report, it could be multiple myeloma, and for the thyroid it had written something else. Now, multiple myeloma is a bone disorder. And her question mark was a valid point, because she was supposed to be checking a thyroid nodule for cancer. So the cancer that develops in a thyroid nodule, the tumor that develops there, is very different in pathology from the tumor that or the cancer cells that will develop if you have multiple myeloma. But a medical error had happened, and because I am a aware patient, because I have done this procedure before, because I have healthcare knowledge, because I also studied a little bit about pathology, though I don't know the difference between how different cancer cells would look, but I understand some medical terminology and I understand how some medical procedures work. So as a result, when that multiple myeloma question mark came, first of all, I had no way to communicate with these doctors in this hospital if I don't have a primary care physician, which I consider as a major hassle for any patient care, because if someone is in severe healthcare crisis, at that time you can't have a regular physician referring you to them for severe health crises, and cancer is a severe health crisis. So at that time, if you are sitting and waiting for this doctor and that doctor and that doctor to connect with each other, all the 3 doctors or 4 doctors actually by this time had been involved in the thyroid procedure. There was a thyroid specialist, there was a radiologist who scanned the ultrasound, there was a FNAC doctor who extracted the FNAC sample, there was also 2-3 technicians in between who had taken my patient history, there was a pathologist who had done the test. And these 4 doctors, one was a clinic doctor, one was a doctor from one hospital, other 2 were FNAC and pathologists were doctors from another hospital. Now at the time, my brother, being a doctor, suggested, why don't you do a secondary analysis of the sample. Now here also a hurdle came up. These people in the hospital provided me the information that I think there were either 5 or 7 slides that had been prepared of this biopsy sample. Now of those 5 and 7 slides, or 7, I don't remember exactly, only 3 were released to me, the rest were kept by the hospital. So now, say there was actually multiple myeloma present in my samples, if they have given only half the samples, what is happening? The rest of the samples may have the multiple myeloma and some of the samples may not have multiple myeloma. So when I went, the second samples went to the other doctor said, you just have a follicular lesion here. So some of these nodules had converted into lesions and some were still nodules. So, and they said it was a benign lesion, it was not a cancerous one. So here I am going to stop this video as well, but I will only add one thing more. I had done more additional blood tests. In my additional blood tests, many things related to multiple myeloma were also showing up in my blood tests. Also, the reason why multiple myeloma showed up in a thyroid extraction was because when the doctor was extracting, she took samples from 2-3 different areas and 2-3 different nodules. When she was taking a couple of, because she pierced my these neck area a couple of times. So when she was extracting from one of the nodule areas, the needle had slipped and it had ended up piercing a bit of my bone or cartilage area. So if it goes and pierces my cartilage or bone near this area, it can contaminate the needle with bone or cartilage samples as well. And bone and cartilage are the places where multiple myeloma cells will show up first if you have multiple myeloma. So if they had taken 3 samples, out of the 3 samples they made 5 to 7 slides, because they section off. I know a little bit of pathology, so I know how they section off the slides. So when they section off these different slides, of that, say 1 or 2 slides are showing because of contamination with the needle of having pierced the cartilage. Now if that sample is showing multiple myeloma, she will be puzzled because she's looking for thyroid cancer. So she wrote a multiple myeloma question mark, but her knowledge is good, that's why, and she's a good doctor, so I will actually applaud her that she at least put multiple myeloma there, even though she knew that she was looking for thyroid cancer related sampling. She also put multiple myeloma as a question mark. Only thing is, if that doctor had good communication system between doctors, or they had good communication system with the patient, and a patient is self-aware like me, she could have found out, and I could have easily found out sooner that it is possible I have multiple myeloma, because multiple myeloma is showing up in my samples, and this is the reason why that I mentioned here. But because she's not communicating with me, she's not communicating with the doctor who extracted the sample, she wasn't sure. And also there is a third thing, this pathologist, being a good pathologist, if She wants to do better research work on this kind of weird patient responses, because it is possible that a patient could have two kinds of cancers developing in the body at the same time. So she could have this same thing happening to other patients in this area. And if she wants to become a better doctor, she should look at the blood reports also of those patients, or other doctors also, internal medicine doctors need to start looking at patient reports. Because what happened to me, I first tried to approach an internal medicine doctor who was from my family. I approached a nuclear medicine doctor who was my friend, and I myself studied my reports. And in my reports, by then whatever reports I had done was showing that cancer was a possibility from the analysis of those reports. But when I showed it to the internal medicine doctor and the nuclear medicine doctor, they both ignored it, saying that your second report is saying it is follicular lesion. So one didn't reply back, and the other one who did reply back, one just said you need to find a good doctor in your area, and the other one, who's a nuclear medicine doctor, she said that it's showing benign, that's why don't worry about it, it must be benign. So she also didn't do the correct patient history analysis. And initially, no one wants to hear that they have cancer. No one wants to think that they have cancer. So initially I also, and there is something called confirmation bias. When she gave me a confirmation, another pathologist gave me a confirmation that it is a benign lesion, I also got relaxed a little bit. And I didn't bother about it for about a month. But again, in that month's time, by then next summer time was approaching. Again, I started getting increased inflammation, and some of the pesticide poisoning related symptoms started manifesting again. That's when I did a second set of tests. And when I looked at the second set of tests regarding inflammation in multiple myeloma, and I restudied my calcium test also, I realized that I am having multiple myeloma, or am in the beginning stages of having multiple myeloma. Because if the pathology report is right, then I definitely have multiple myeloma. Second, if the pathology report is wrong, then also I have pre-cancer related to multiple myeloma, because what had happened was the immunoglobulins that should be at a certain level when you have multiple myeloma, some of those immunoglobulins were at that level. Then, and I'm not a doctor, that's why I don't remember all the clinical reports of mine. But I'm telling you what my reports were indicating for me, because some of the blood reports, initial blood reports, were showing anemia, inflammation, or cancer as a symptom. And when I went to a doctor, cardiologist also had checked out, he said you must have anemia, because the report was saying possibility of anemia. But if you look deeper at all the symptoms, combine all the symptoms plus the blood reports plus the ultrasound plus other things, the symptoms were actually pointing towards more towards inflammation or cancer than towards simple anemia. And what else started happening? If the doctor is not the calcium, now let's come back to the calcium. Because I was having increased inflammation for over a year, in between, because I was assured that okay, maybe it's not cancer, but my symptoms are not going away. So at that time I had gone to see a Ayurvedic doctor, and that Ayurvedic doctor also, after listening to some of my patient history, said you might have stress, you might have these things, and you do have heightened inflammation. So for that, for the breathing problems and heightened inflammation and some cardiac, and she said your stomach also might have a lot of toxins accumulated. So for toxic release of toxins from my body, she gave me some prescriptions, and her medications worked. Most of her medications worked. One or two medications didn't work, but the ones that worked, I took them exactly as she was prescribing to me. The ones that weren't working, and I was actually at the time also having allergy symptoms to different food, so, and my allergy report had shown that I had a yeast allergy. And what happened was, one of the medications she had prescribed had yeast related product in it. As a result, or either it was a contamination of yeast or it actually had yeast in its ingredients. I don't remember right now, but that product was giving me an allergy, so I stopped taking that product. There was another product whose tablet had something in it that was interfering with my body's health, so I stopped taking that tablet too. But the other tablets and other powders that she gave for detoxing, gave for respiratory problems, gave for some stomach related ailments, to cleanse the stomach from toxins, they all worked for me. And she also gave a dietary regimen to reduce inflammation. And in her dietary regimen, she recommended that I stop, and because my allergies were happening at that time from milk products, like I used to love consuming all kinds of milk products, and paneer was my favorite dish to consume at least once a week for a long time. But as a result of the allergies I started developing from paneer and some milk products, she said, and she also said in Ayurvedic principles, you should not take these food, and in that, except for ghee, other milk products were banned by her. So I stopped taking those milk products. I had myself already started reducing taking paneer unless the paneer was agreeing with me. But after she mentioned it, I completely stopped taking paneer. Instead of paneer, for and non-veg also, she had said you shouldn't eat it. I had already stopped eating non-veg by then. So the only protein sources were suggested were lentils and beans. And in the lentils, she was suggesting green moong dal. So now what happened with the beans, green moong dal, green vegetables? She was trying to tell me to take those cooler vegetables which will reduce the inflammation. Now the cooler food groups that would reduce the inflammation that she suggested, her therapy was right. But with the green moong dal, there was some contamination in the food related to pesticides and chemicals in it. So when that green moong dal was, after washing also, if it was getting cooked, even then some pesticide smell was there, so I couldn't consume it. So what had started happening was, slowly over time, my replacement of calcium sources were less. So I was not getting enough calcium in my body at that time, because I had stopped eating some of the major food groups that I used to consume. My main source of calcium used to be earlier nuts and paneer and milk products. But because milk products were causing inflammation, and according to Ayurveda and also my own personal experience, because even nuts, some of the nuts started causing allergies, I had stopped taking them as a result. But the supplemental therapy that I should have still taken, I was not getting enough calcium. That's why my calcium in the body was showing around slightly less than 10. And if my calcium had shown up in those tests over 11 or 12, according to one criteria of analyzing multiple myeloma, I would have had multiple myeloma. So I either have multiple myeloma, or my body was just short of getting into multiple myeloma's really bad physical health symptoms, and it had stopped going into that just because I had done some Ayurvedic therapy, and just because I was not consuming enough normal levels of calcium, right? So with this kind of symptom, I have been existing for so many years. I can again go to a doctor, a better doctor, find a better doctor to find the resolution to my health problem. But in the meantime, what started happening, every time in the summertime, sprays are getting sprayed around. Not just summertime, from March to June, July, I have observed this pesticide poisoning related health problems escalating a lot for me. And because I'm already almost near multiple myeloma, or actually in multiple myeloma related phase, every time any pesticide has been sprayed around in the home or neighborhood, or it's present in the food, water, air, clothes, bedding, I am getting severe health distress. I get all kinds of breathing distress, cardiac distress. My skin starts getting darker when my blood is not able to pump the right level of oxygen. Because what is happening is, multiple myeloma is a bone disorder, it also impacts our bloods, or pesticides basically are impacting our blood. Because if those pesticides bind to our blood cells, they prevent the blood from doing its normal function. When it prevents the blood from doing its normal function, the blood flow, because my blood was showing thicker, my blood's I think sedimentation rate or something was higher, my blood's hemoglobin was much lower than what I usually used to have as normal hemoglobin levels. My cardiac distress continued, and now it had flipped from increased heart rate to decreased heart rate, because as slowly your body is winding down, then slowly the distress that initially it's saying ki get out of this area, get this toxin out of my body, but if that toxin keeps binding more and more to my cardiac cells, cardiac blood flow and everything, cardiac function also slows down. And these are all symptoms of either pesticide poisoning, organ damage, cardiac problems, as well as multiple myeloma related symptoms, because they are all interconnected. My body is not just one organ or one cell having a health issue. My body is a multifaceted organ, always working together to do something to keep me in a healthy state. But I can't be in a healthy physical state if my body is continuously having exposures to pesticides. Now, for a while, despite the multiple myeloma symptoms, I ignored going to a oncologist. I don't know why I did that. I think I was afraid maybe of multiple myeloma being true. Second thing is, I had improved a little bit in symptoms when winter time came. So when winter time came and my symptoms had improved, and I also had some problems at home where my dad was not listening, that let's not use pesticides. He was not believing my reports. He was really providing a lot of additional stress to my cardiac system. I had done even a cardiac test where my C-reactive protein levels had increased, because I was getting continuous stress from his lack of listening to the problems I'm facing with food, the problems I'm facing with contaminated food, contaminated water, contaminated air if spraying is happening. And as a result, I decided to just travel and see, are there any other places in India where pesticide exposures are less. So I had traveled to a couple of different cities, and when traveling, this is what happened to me. Any place I went when pesticide contamination is not there in the air, water, food, my health looks great, my skin looks great, I am glowing. But any place a little bit also pesticide starts getting sprayed and I get it via inhalation, or it has gone into their water and food has been cooked in it, or I'm ordering food from a hotel who has pesticide exposures there, as a result their food is contaminated. All of these factors immediately end up impacting my cardiac health, liver health. Some way or the other, something gets impacted, because all organs are trying to expel the pesticide from the body. But if they are already, in my previous video I talked about the liver problems, and I had high liver enzymes. High liver enzymes also happen to us when we have high chemical toxins damaging to the liver present in our body. That's when usually heightened liver can happen. There are other health reasons also when heightened liver enzymes can happen, but anytime our body has heightened a concentration of a toxin that is harmful to our health, liver enzymes will go up, because liver is continuously trying to produce these enzymes that will extract away the toxin from the body, eliminate it via our body's natural systems, for which those enzymes are required. That's why the heightened elevated enzymes are happening. But anyways, so what I'm saying is, this cancer also, it is not that it developed in one day. It developed after 15, 20, maybe even 30 years of exposure to different kinds of pesticides from different places. In Mumbai, my family lives in Kolkata, so in West Bengal. So from exposure in West Bengal, in Mumbai, in US, in Salt Lake City. And then I am also a traveling person. Like, I used to love traveling when I was living in US. So I have traveled to multiple cities in US. I have also traveled while having the pre-cancer or cancer symptoms to different cities in India as well. So I have had at least pesticide exposures from not just one city, one state, one place of residence. I had multiple pesticide exposures from multiple sources in multiple cities of US and India. And I had forgotten to mention in my previous video, but when I was traveling in US also, there are some states where heightened pesticides are used, which are densely populated cities of US, and in those states also I had pesticide exposure. Then like cities like New York, cities like California, wherever there is high density of population, pesticides are invariably higher in concentration in the air, water, food. Plus anywhere there is, even if it is not a major city of India, like I had gone to Udaipur also, but it is still a city. As a result, there also lots of pesticides are being used. Even if I go to a town like place of India is such a highly populated country that even a town like place has enough population to pollute the water and air of that area with pesticide usage regularly. And even if you're not directly using in your homes, if your farmer has been using it while washing the vegetables, your water supply is invariably getting contaminated with it. If you didn't have someone who washes the vegetables and foods carefully, then your pesticide is there in the food while even after you have cooked it. And cooking doesn't kill pesticides, right? Cooking will continue giving you the pesticide. Or if the water in which you have cooked has been contaminated, then also it will contaminate you. If say like how in my home, when they are spraying the pesticides, even if I live in a top floor, some amount of the sprayed pesticide is getting inside via the windows. So say it is a restaurant, and in restaurant, because cooks are always constantly, in India especially, constantly whipping up food one after the other, so most of the utensils will be open. Most of the vegetables will be openly just there on the table while they are cutting and chopping and everything. At that time, most of the utensils, spices, flour, rice, whatever are the main ingredients used in whatever dishes they are preparing, those main ingredient bags or jars or bottles or chopped up boxes, everything usually is prone to have pesticide contamination if people don't understand that when you are spraying in an area, even if you have sprayed on the floor or you had just sprayed outside the window of the kitchen of that place, even then that spraying that happened outside the window or the spraying that happened inside the kitchen while you are cooking, or even if you are not cooking, you are spraying but any bottle is open a little bit also, some microparticles will go into your food. So that's why in food and hospitality industry, in travel industry, a lot of pesticides are used. When I was traveling, I was getting a lot of symptoms while traveling to any place, any car, any vehicle which has pesticide sprayed on it. I had problems. Any aeroplanes nowadays have automatic spraying of pesticides and air fresheners. Then also my respiratory distress and cough was increasing, and not just mine. I observed when I was traveling in the airplane where there were two airplanes there who were spraying automatically air fresheners and on pesticides or other chemicals. Now in both those airplanes, whatever the thing they were spraying chemically was not just distressing me. I was having breathing problem. I wore mask or I put a dupatta around my face so that I don't inhale that chemical. But there are people who are not wearing masks. There were people who are not putting anything around their mouth and they are inhaling these chemicals. And they were having cold flu like symptoms, sneezing, cough. Some children were crying on the plane because they are causing health distress. It's just that humans don't correlate these regularly used air fresheners or pesticides with health problems, because we think just because they have been used for centuries or decades of our life, they're safe for our health. But no, if you have enough chemical toxins in your body, all of these chemicals have a potential to be unsafe for your health. Each of these chemicals by itself has its own set of health problems, and in combination they can cause increased health problems, which is what has happened to me. and that's why I'm making these videos, in order to raise awareness that pesticides usage, chemical usages, if humans do not reduce in their daily lives, we are all falling sick. And like how I fell sick over a period of at least 10 to 15 years of recorded knowledge of the pesticide exposure, where I have pesticide exposure, I remember. But actually speaking, more than those were the immediate exposures, but more than those 15 years time period of my life also, I have had hidden pesticide exposures, just that my awareness level was not there, which is similar to every one of us's life experiences. We are not aware when pesticide is causing us sweating, when I'm getting upset stomach from pesticide, or my skin is getting irritated, or my heart rate is increasing, or I have runny nose, I had sticky eyes, red eyes also for a while, one time. All these symptoms, they didn't develop one day, they developed over a long time. Each of them happened every 2-3 months, especially during those peak times when pesticides were being sprayed, or pesticide spray had happened and I was eating food from a kitchen when traveling, things like that. So I hope this was informative. If you have any questions about this, please drop a comment. Thank you.